Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to this video lesson on Renaissance artwork. Your task tonight is to watch this video and take down the notes on your notes page provided in class or on the website as we go along. This will be supplemented by a lecture in class, and we'll kind of finish up the notes. So when you only get about halfway through the notes, do not worry. We'll get through the rest of it tomorrow in class. Now, yesterday we talked a lot about the different ideas that flowed out of the Renaissance, but I think it's also important to at least identify as well some of the artwork and how the style of artwork and the theme of artwork changed because of the Renaissance. So here are your objectives for today. Describe the difference between medieval art and Renaissance art. What types of people financed made these works of art possible on a practical level? List and categorize the most famous of Renaissance artists. And lastly, and probably one of the more interesting questions you'll get from me in one of these lectures is, what do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have to do with the Renaissance? If you already know the answer, please don't shout it out. We'll come up with it later in the lecture. One of the big changes that happened as part of the Renaissance was the themes, the ideas, the things that were depicted within artwork that changed from medieval times to Renaissance era. Now, we spoke a little bit about the medieval era prior to this, but for the most part, artwork had religious themes. Now, this was twofold. First of all, the church was really the only institution left in Europe that had a significant amount of money. That significant amount of money paid these artists to do artwork. And of course, they're going to do religious themes because of it. In addition, artwork was used as kind of a storytelling device. Most of Europe at the time was illiterate, and therefore churches needed artwork to depict some of the greatest scenes from the Bible so that they could more be easily taught to the common people. Once we get into the Renaissance era, though, things start to change a little bit more because the source of money for these Renaissance artwork changes dramatically. A lot more artwork is now going to be depicting nature, the world. You're going to see a lot of references to ancient Greek and Roman myth, which is completely opposite the modern Catholic Europe perspective. And again, that's because the Catholic Church is not necessarily the only one buying artwork anymore. Nobles, lords, merchants, cities, even the highest bidder would be the one who is taking on these art projects. So here's kind of a look at what we're trying to kind of talk about. Over here on the left-hand side, you have artwork from the medieval period. It's very simple. It has lots of color, but it's very simple, and it's telling a story. On the right-hand side here, you have a Greek and Roman myth scene, and you can instantly tell that there's a difference between these two. This difference we'll go into a little bit more in class. Who's actually paying for this Renaissance artwork? Well, the wealthiest people in these cities across Europe are the ones. Merchants, for the most part, who want to show off their newfound wealth, much like a wealthy person today would buy a very, very large house, or they'd buy a very, very expensive and fast, Maserati or something like that type of vehicle. Merchants didn't necessarily buy cars in order to show off their wealth. They bought artwork. And then once they bought that artwork, they hung it all over various cities that they lived, and they just happened to have little plaques underneath that said, financed by wealthy merchant. Now, one of the best patrons, especially in Italy, but maybe throughout Europe, was Lorenzo de' Medici, a very wealthy individual from a very powerful family of Florence. He financed many of the great artists that we'll talk about in class. His artwork, which he purchased, just dotted the entire city and made it one of the greatest and most beautiful cities in Europe for hundreds of years. Here's some other changes that are going to occur in artwork as part of the Renaissance. The big change that's going to come out of there, of course, is that no longer are religious themes, stories going to be told artwork is going to be depicted as realistically as possible. We'll look at this a little bit more in class, but notice kind of in this image down below, the detail that goes into his hair, his face, the shape of his arm. Look at the trees in the background. I mean, everything is shown as realistically as possible. We're not really worried about what story is being told or anything like that. They're just trying to show off how great this scene is. In addition, this is going to be the first time that we're going to see 3D images being put on a 2D surface, something known as perspective. The way that works is, although this tree is almost undoubtedly taller than these humans, by drawing the humans taller than the trees, you're giving the image what's known as depth. And when you give something depth, you are essentially indicating that these trees are bigger. However, they are far away. And since they're far away, we're going to draw them smaller. Again, some of the other changes that occur because of the Renaissance: building designs are going to change, subject matter is going to change. Churches, palaces, public buildings, they're going to start using columns and domes. Now, several of these architectural technologies are not necessarily brand new. They were used, especially the columns idea, they were used in ancient Greek and Roman buildings. However, with some of the ideas that we talked about the aspects of the Renaissance, specifically the idea of inspiration from ancient civilizations, those columns and domes and archways and triangular rooftops, those are all being brought back into society as something that was kind of not cool for a very long time, but now is cool again. Kind of that retro idea that kind of tends to creep up every once in a while. Well, that's it for this video lecture. Whenever you actually come to class, we're going to discuss the major artists of the Renaissance and how they impacted society. Please make sure that if you need to, you go back and rewatch any section that you need for the notes. I will be checking these notes tomorrow. And make sure to take that quiz that is located just under this video lecture on the class website. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a great day.